All right, so this training is really designed around helping people set up new groups. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're all meeting here on stolen land, unceded land, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I want to express my deep solidarity with the First Nations movement and the entire Black Lives Matter campaign, and just yeah, acknowledge that we stand in solidarity with that. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are in a time of climate and ecological emergency, and our actions today and every day impact the habitability of our planet for ourselves and for generations to come, and that First Nations people have been on the front line of that emergency since colonization. And I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge all of you for taking time out of your Saturday morning to be here today and address that emergency. And so thank you so much for being here. My name's Violet Coco. I have been setting up local groups since maybe early 2019 with Extinction Rebellion. This is my beautiful local group on West Side in Melbourne. And this is peak pandemic and us still meeting together and being strong. And I think that that's really important, that when you set up a local group, it's not just about having a rebellion, it's about the community that provides and the support that provides. And a key, really, really key part of that is good facilitation, and keeping people on a good trajectory together. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share some of my learnings on that process and those processes. And I'm so inviting to all of you to share as well on what you have learned, not just within Extinction Rebellion, but in our many places that we learn skills throughout our life. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about training etiquette, and then we're going to do a check-in and meet each other. So who is this training for? So this training is for people who identify as mass mobilizers, and that is also for people who work within outreach, so people who create and grow the movement. This training will cover the steps leading up to creating a group, resources associated to that, the aftercare of setting up a group, basically not leaving them alone. It's good learning in that. And then I just want to let you know what a mobilizer is. I'm pretty sure you all know, but we're also recording, so some people might not know. And so a mobilizer is someone who has the mandate, which if you've done SOS training, you'll know what that is, but I know it's a bit of a jargon giraffe. But they've been written out basically the mandate or to create and support local groups using the guidelines of the Mass Mobilization Manual. So you all should have the Mass Mobilization Manual emailed to you. But basically a mobilizer creates local groups or working groups, mobilizes those groups with new information, guide that group through training and retention, and then help them build for those 3 synchronized waves of action, and then working within the structure of mass mobilization. Recording? Yeah, okay, great. Cool. So here we are with the local group formation, which is sort of what it looks like as a base format. And so basically we have our twin tasks: actions, which is civil disobedience, and mobilization, which is growing the movement. And those twin tasks are supported by arts. You know, we are a beautiful rebellion, and regenerative culture, which is, you know, keeping ourselves sustained and keeping the areas that we are in, you know, beautiful and well cared for. So that's the basic layout. And then we've got the wider movement. You can have an external coordinator, which is really important, who sort of officially connects the group to the wider rebellion. and then an internal coordinator who does things like organize where the room's going to be, or the Zoom, or helps facilitate, make sure that minutes are being taken. They don't have to do everything, but it's just about making sure that it's being done, taking responsibility for making sure it's being done. And same with the external. If you don't want to go to all the external meetings, but you can coordinate someone to be there, that's sort of, yeah, I always work off that. You don't have to do all the work, but you got to make sure it gets done. And so having those structure, and this structure is really important because it helps keep us focused and aligned. And the idea with the action side of things is that every group should have 10 people ready to go to mobilize into a wave. And so we want to make sure that when we call, sometimes we don't know when the most strategic time is going to be to do these big waves of action. But if every group has 10 people ready to go and we all manage to converge at the same time, quick response in these 3 waves. I'm hoping that you've all kind of seen this stuff a little bit before. So I'm just touching on it, but reminding you that, wave 1, which is where we're in at the moment, every group should be aiming to do an action every 3 to 6 weeks. And then you move into wave 2, which we've got a wave 2 action happening around the country all before Christmas. So if you want to find out more about what your local action is doing, go to takethepledge.earth. Again, also for the recording, making sure that information's in there. Anybody listening, takethepledge.earth, please go register. And then we move into our wave 3, which is the big one where we all blockade basically a city until our demands are met. And so the idea is that we hold beautiful, loving environment where families and vulnerable parties feel safe to come to the streets and hold those until the government's like, okay, we need to get these people off the streets. What are your demands? And at that point, we can start negotiating and say, okay, citizens' assemblies, obviously. So we've got our statement of purpose. So it's really important that when you're facilitating a group to really keep them grounded. And so you don't necessarily need to do every statement at every group. You'll sort of get an idea of what the team needs, whether, it's been a rough week and you might just read the regen one, or, people feeling a bit scattered, so we need to do a focus. But this is this one, and I'm going to love a volunteer to read it out for me. Someone jump in. Yeah, Leslie, thank you. Oh, hang on, there it is.
I've just got to get rid of my little pictures. We are resolved to work together to build a mass movement to engage in peaceful civil disobedience, to save our families, our communities, life on this continent and our planet from destruction. We are working to create thousands of Extinction Rebellion local groups in Australia in order to empower thousands upon thousands of people to engage in non-violent direct action. Our twin tasks are to grow the movement and engage in civil disobedience until our 3 demands are met. We care deeply about those we love and this world we live in. This is why we are prepared to do this work out of a sense of necessity. We embrace each other's differences and leave quarrels at the door when we come into an XR space. We are here to get on with the job and serve the common good.
Thanks, Leslie. Does anyone want to comment on how that statement makes them feel? Leslie, do you want to? Yeah.
It's great to bring it back to the, you can get caught up in so many of the little details and who's doing what and the banners it's great to just keep focusing back on why we're here and what we're doing, why we're doing it, so that it doesn't get lost, because it can get very tangential, I've seen in meetings. So for me, that's why it's really important to keep it focused back on our main purposes.
Exactly. So yeah, and this is the respect statement. So obviously if you're going into a meeting, there's a bit of tension, you're going to try and make a decision that people don't really feel confident, or like that they're arguing or whatever, just like whacking this out. This is a really great resource for you. So could somebody read this one out for me? Yeah, thanks, John.
This statement of respect shall be read at the beginning of every meeting, call, Zoom, event and presentation. We commit to a culture of respect as we work together in person or online. We will communicate with mutual appreciation and kindness. When we disagree, we will assume goodwill on the part of others. We will speak from our own experience without making assumptions about what is in the minds and hearts of others. We will refrain from naming, shaming, calling out, and being personally judgmental. We will only commit to tasks we can do, and we will return those we have not been able to do. We respect the tasks of others and have trust in their abilities. We strive to be on time for meetings and liaise with each other on accessible times for our meetings to end. We are a community united in our work, and everyone is valued. We are family.
Beautiful. How does that make you feel, John? Oh, you still on mute?
Pretty powerful.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, so what happens when you finish this training is that you go through and get a mentor, somebody in your state who we connect you with to make sure that you can ask any questions. We also hold weekly meetings to keep you supported. So just so you know, this isn't the end of the line. Once you go through this training, we will stay in touch with you. So the place to start with growing a group is this map. And so in this map, we have, you might have seen it at the last training if you were here, we've got all the people who've registered for groups. Here you go, where they all are. This is pretty updated. And then we pick a spot that's got a hotspot of rebels, but no local group. And so you can see there's quite a few. And then we basically decide that we're going to mobilize that area. So the important thing, first thing you do, always, and Andy makes this mistake all the time. We just don't go in and just create and start working. You need to check out the area, the lay of the land. You want to connect in, find out who is already on the ground, working with the current structures, the state structures, the parts of the movement that are already moving. Yeah, it's really, really important to be diplomatic. Okay. Then we want to get connected. So we've got Action Network Access, which is basically the platform that we use to hold all of the information on the rebels who are currently registered. So we have over 30,000 registered rebels on our network, and a lot of those are not active. And so Action Network holds that information, and basically you can request from your mentor the information of the rebels in that area, so you can start contacting them, whether that's through rebel ringing, emails, inviting them. I don't know how else you would contact them. I think those are two. And then you've got your outreach circles. So in New South Wales, we've got communities, and that's sort of the group that we would make sure we're connecting new rebels in. But around the state, it's all different. All right, here's the important stuff. When we get to 2 weeks before the meeting, this is a screenshot that I took when I first did this training from Dolly in the UK. And I think it might still be my desktop. And so just so I remember, so this is a really important slide for you to grab onto. 2 weeks before your talk, you want to set up your Heading for Extinction talk on Action Network, figure out who's going to facilitate that talk, set up local group Facebook page if there's not already one, populate the page with relevant contact, find rebels within the local area in Action Network, set up your rebel ringing campaign, set up your emails. It's a lot, I know, but you've got 2 weeks to get it all done. You don't have to do it on the first day. But basically the idea is you want to generate some information flowing around the area and get some people to that talk. I'm doing 4 talks next week in the Central Coast, and we've changed it from a Heading for Extinction talk to actually a Rebel Cafe after South Australia has had such good luck with those. And so we're going to give that format a bit of a go. But basically, yes, Leslie.
What is a Rebel Cafe?
It's a more open format sort of training, and it's, you know, basically getting people to give you the information of how they're feeling and what they're thinking, rather than necessarily presenting for an hour and a half and then being like, all right, that's a lot of information, go home and think about it. Yeah, Cass.
I think Jamie, when he goes to them, he's got like a 10-minute version of Heading for Extinction. He just pounds out a few of the facts, and then people talk about how they react to that, but it's actually hearing how people can connect to XR. So instead of coming to a 90-minute presentation, then having a half-hour talk, it's 10 minutes of presentation, and the rest is all getting to know other rebels. Because it's local, people then see each other in the supermarket, in the street, they might know each other. It's actually really powerful. They're not dispersing to other postcodes. They're all from that postcode. That's the powerful thing about local, regional meetings like that.
Yeah, and I think that really is the strength of them, and creating those local groups rather than doing the Heading for Extinction talk nationally, which I think is great because it's just sort of getting out the information and the culture. Because it's a local area thing, it's really going to be valuable to get them connecting, because that's what it's all about, local groups working together and supporting each other. So they're going to, be your frontline friends. Posting events on local green groups is really important. And then if you feel confident, sending out a press release to the local radio or things like that is really useful. And then 1 week, basically to before, very similar, just getting, keeping that flow going, keeping those check-ins going, making sure that you've got tech confidence. I've started Zoom calls with groups of people, especially in regional areas. And I've been like, okay, everybody change your name on Zoom to have your country. And people are just like, I don't know how to do that. So being aware that there are different levels of confidence on Zoom, and if people are not confident, being able to support them through that. Being creative with how you get stuff around. So if you were hitting up a country town as a mobilizer, what's one way that you could sort of create information flow around the town? Can I just get... Yeah, tell me. Yeah, how would you get stuff around, information, flyer? Yeah, John?
Oh, I'd start with where people kind of congregate. So, the local store, with signage at the local store, ask permission to have a desk outside the local store on a Saturday morning, stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, perfect. Micah, do you have... You're on mute. You got it?
Sometimes space works and sometimes it doesn't. Well, I know before I moved to Hobart, I was in a smaller town, and they had things like the local newspaper as well. And there were already, I'm guessing not every small town would have these kind of things, but there were already like community groups that were interested in preserving their local area as well.
Yeah, exactly. Connecting with local groups. Cass, then Leslie?
We've got a really inventive rebel who's a school teacher, and she's carrying chalk wherever she goes, and she's chalking messages. And then if she's got a poster, it will be, look, with an arrow to the poster. So, because there's posters all around us and things. So, but she carries chalk everywhere and just writes XR messages.
Right.
Lovely.
I love that so much. Leslie?
Having come from a small local town, small regional town, there's lots of groups like Probus groups and Lions clubs and Rotary groups and all the very more conventional people, but they're always looking for people to come and have a chat to them. So that's often a good way in. Notice boards as well.
Yes, excellent. Nat, do you have one for us?
I think you guys might have covered everything. Yeah, so no. Well, initially the Rebel Cafe, but the information stalls. I love I've done the talking. I think that's terrific fun. Postering, yeah, all of it.
Yeah, awesome. And Sage, any of those appeal to you?
I like postering and flyers with QR codes for depending on who's there, or sending someone, like even just a small action or a place, like John said, set up a place and people will come.
Yeah, great.
Can I just do a clarifying thing? I was talking to the XR Rebels in Launceston, north of Hobart, who are actually at a stall yesterday. I was on the phone and they said at the moment, then even though we're 100 days without any COVID, they're not allowed to hand out flyers. People have to take photographs. They're not actually allowed to hand out paper flyers, which I think maybe we need to be aware of.
Yeah, that's why I've been using the QR codes more now, and just like holding a QR code and then they can scan it and have the flyer on there.
Strangely, in Melbourne, we haven't had any trouble with flyers. So, we hand out vast numbers right next to the police and they don't have an issue yet. And neither do the public. So there you go.
Yeah, I know when we were doing Tari, they were handing them out, but they had gloves on so that it was sort of just that one layer of removed. So there's lots of ways you can do about it. I'm going to keep going with this one. So basically, once you have to sort of get a bit more comfortable making the ask. Know your messaging. There's a really great booklet called Don't Mention the Emergency, which is written by Jane Morton, which talks a lot about the do's and don'ts of talking about the climate crisis or climate emergency. And a lot of that she's built that work up over years and years and years. And it's actually the work that the original Heading for Extinction talk from the UK comes from. They actually called her and asked her for her work and built Extinction Rebellion messaging off her work, which is really incredible. I just want to also acknowledge that sometimes we don't always 100% agree with the messaging of Extinction Rebellion. There's a difference between being the preacher and the thinker. This is something that I learned through philosophy. And so when we're talking about Extinction Rebellion, we're actually talking on behalf of thousands and thousands of people. And so it's really important that we are true to that agreed messaging, and then and making it clear when it's our own thoughts. So saying, okay, well, Extinction Rebellion would talk about it like this, but I personally believe that. And a really great example of that is myself. I'm a vegan. Extinction Rebellion don't talk about solutions like that because it can be quite divisive. And what we say is, we trust the science and we trust citizens' assemblies to sort that out. Now is not the time to have that argument. Now is the time to work together. And what I've found is that, people who hold very, very different values to me still marching beside me on the road and holding the banner with me. And that's the strength of that, is that we can have these personal opinions and personal morals and know that Extinction Rebellion sort of work towards a better form of democracy. So we actually have a platform to have engaging proper conversations about this stuff. And so, I guess just being aware of a facilitator and a mobilizer and somebody who speaks on behalf of the thousands and thousands of people who are part of Extinction Rebellion, that we really have to be clear on our messaging. Being a good listener is a really important part of it, which is, going to help if you obviously went to those intentional conversation on Thursday night, which was absolutely fantastic. And listening is a really big part of hearing what is under the waterline for people, what are their barriers, and what are their strengths as well. So yeah, and really think about what you've heard. You got to treat every person that you meet as like, yeah, one of the most important people to mobilize, because they very well could be. They could be that one person that makes that really amazing action that holds the city for an extra 2 days or whatever. So you just never know the potential of every person that you're talking to. And so really listening and thinking about their strengths and finding ways for them to connect in. All right, communication skills. I'm going to pick on you, Micah. Would you be able to just read the first 3 dot points and give us your understanding of them?
Yes, so communication, be welcoming and listen, talk to everyone. Understand the community. Consider speaker, research local issues or history, listen to local concerns. Share experience and show genuine excitement about supporting and growing new groups. And well, some of the things I can see in that is that there's no, like you welcome and respect everyone that comes, and there's no kind of discrimination or judgment. And I can also see that as much as is possible, you should tailor your communication to your audience, to what is meaningful for them, and be genuine and enthusiastic.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. That's great. And Nat, can I pick on? Can you do the last of them?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so be aware and respectful of new groups, group members' time commitments. Be aware of technology gaps, energy and enthusiasm, and sorry, just moving this. Offer support, reassurance, kindness, and listen. And establish. So, was I supposed to do the last?
Yeah.
Establish regular contact and clear, quick communication. Yeah, cool. Okay. So I think that's. I guess, I mean, the first point, be aware and respectful of time commitments. I mean, that's all about, I guess, being really mindful of the potential for burnout in a movement like this, particularly when everyone cares so much and wants to do a lot. So just being really mindful from that at the outset, being aware of technology gaps. I mean, that's about just being as inclusive as possible and trying to eliminate the potential for really sort of otherwise probably minor issues to sort of become barriers to getting everyone on board and participating. Energy and enthusiasm, and the others, I guess that really key, because I'd imagine a lot of people are, stepping out of their comfort zones when, they engage in activism. And so I'm partly speaking from personal experience here. So, feeling that you're in a safe space and that this could also be fun and not just kind of scary is probably really important. And of course, support, reassurance, and kindness. Listening, I mean, I think that really is a key one, because if you're listening, then that helps you to have a really empathetic response to people, to understand what support they need, what reassurance they require, because it may not just be support, it may just be, just confirmation that, what they're feeling is really valid, acknowledging that, and helping them sort of navigate sort of new pathway to become a rebel. And the last one, a little bit of NVDA training that we did. I think that last point actually it's actually also really critical in terms of concrete step forward pathway, make those connections, capitalize on that so that we don't lose all that initial interest and enthusiasm.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much, Nat. That's awesome. I'll just tell you one really big learning that I have at the moment that I think that we haven't really addressed that well in Extinction Rebellion, which is that a lot of our meetings are at nighttime, right when the kiddies are going to bed. And so we're not being as family friendly as we could be because it makes it quite hard for parents. And so I just invite you all to keep that in mind as we move forward. Okay, cool. So be aware of acronyms and communication platforms, XR specific language, like what is regen, what is mass mobilization, what is a mandate, all that stuff. This is a whole new language for people. And so we get a little bit caught up in it. And so just being aware of jargon, I think, is super important. And the other thing is, yes, John. Yeah.
I was just going to make the point about acronyms. I reckon they're really important to avoid. I do anyway, because I think they communicate elitism, and they what is it? They kind of exclude people. You're either in the club that knows them, or you're in the club that isn't game to ask what they mean.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. No worries. So now we're just going to move into some facilitation techniques. Yeah, the learning outcomes here is to meeting facilitation alignment with, got to move you all, your pretty faces are in my way, with XR self-organizing systems. Can I just get a temperature check? Yes, I know what self-organizing systems are. I'm not really sure, no idea. Yeah, okay. And Nat, do you want to just shout it out?
Yes, yeah, yes, I know what an SOS is.
Common challenges of meeting facilitation, basic practice of meeting facilitation techniques, and the integrative consent-based decision-making practices. And I'm going to get you all to break out at the end and have a quick go at someone's going to, well, we probably won't break out because so few of us, but somebody else is going to facilitate us through agreeing on a cake recipe. So be ready for that one. Already covered that. Okay, so everybody here should be pretty familiar with the XR principles and values. If you're facilitating a new group, I would recommend that you put these out on the table, that everybody has a good look at them before we move in. There's this thing when you grow a movement, right? Yeah, Cass has got hers flashing around. When you grow a movement, you have fast growth, but shallow culture. Slow growth or deep culture. And those two options depend on how much you're willing to give a group in terms of that culture. And so what we learned is that when we set up a lot of groups really quickly and then leave them to go, they don't end up with a deep culture of XR. But when we give them a little bit more nourishing, then they end up with a deep culture, and they stay and they're stronger and they hold for longer. So I think it's just really important that we understand that those are our two options when starting up a group. Okay, radical inclusivity. Everyone is heard, everyone is valued equally. There are no dominant voices. We seek the collective wisdom of the meeting, respect everyone's opinion and perspective, and people can participate feeling comfortable without fear of ridicule or judgment. Beautiful. It's really essential that we trust each other. And it's so difficult because, like I say, we can end up working with people who we have very different values on a lot of different things, but we trust each other that we're here to solve this together, and that this is going to give us a good format to solve it all together. So trusting the facilitator to really help keep people in line. We can't help but be passionate. We're all here because we're warriors. We're all here because we care deeply and passionately and are willing to fight for that, but don't fight each other. We need to work together. So skills for a facilitator. So knowledge of how SOS works is so important. Active listening, sensing and language skills, being cheerful. I know that sometimes there's a bit of pushback on, I guess, being like, you have to be cheerful because people are who they are in that day. But I think it's really important to give the room energy, and you'll get the energy back. But you bring what you can that day. I've had facilitated meetings where I've just been at the start, been like, guys, I'm suffering 10,000 climate grief today, so I'm just going to be a little bit lower today, and I'm sorry that you have to go through that with me, but we're all in this together, and if it was you, I'd be there for you, so let's get on with it. And so that's just what it is. Yeah, the training team have suffered through a lot of my climate grief days, and feel so supported and loved by them. So thanks so much. Empathetic, clear about the aim, confidence but not ego driven. And I have no idea what NVC is. Cass, do you know what that is? Yeah.
Non-violent communication.
Yeah, there you go.
An acronym.
I'll have to fix it. I picked up this training from somebody else, so I'm just running through it with you. All right, clarity of aims is really important. Ability to wear different hats. So I've been to meetings and people have been like, okay, now I'm putting on my Friends of the Earth hat. Okay, and now I'm putting on my Frontline Action on Coal hat. And I've got to ask these questions. So just feeling comfortable. Again, it's the difference between the preacher and the thinker. It's okay to have your own thoughts and feelings about things, but just being aware that when you're talking on behalf of thousands of people who are a part of a specific, conglomeration and agreement on messaging. Sensing tensions and unrest is really important, and leaning into that. Don't shy away, because that sort of stuff just festers. So helping people move through, going through your regen training, conflict resilience is super important. What are the 3 R's, Cass? Resilience, are they all R's?
Resilience, regeneration, and rebellion.
Hey! Having clear communication, and again, back to that active listening. I cannot tell you enough that one of the most important parts of a facilitator is listening. There it is again. So let's go through some basic facilitation techniques. Leslie, can you read out these for me?
Sure. So we introducing the meeting using the statements that we use to bring everyone into the room, using the acknowledgement of country, sort of grounding everybody in the space and the purpose that we serve. Well, hopefully you've got an agenda to go by. So asking someone to speak would be the person on the agenda. Well, asking someone to be quiet is a really important skill, or asking. One of the things I loved in the meetings that I've been to is that one of our facilitators says up front quite openly, can I have your permission to shut you down if I think we're running out of time, or if I think you're getting off topic? And that's great, because people then just go, yeah, okay. And she's sort of already got consent to do that. Summarising agreements and disagreements, a very important part, because sometimes things can get lost, and to be able to bring it all back into a shorter statement about what's actually been said, and the decisions that are made, that's very important, because then everyone's got right, this is where we're going to go, and then actions, and particularly assigning the roles of people in actions. Refer conflict discussion out of the meeting to focus on the agenda. So I guess haven't come across XR's way of dealing with conflict, but I guess if you've got people in the room who are having some heated interaction, you would ask if you could meet with them later to help them work through that a little bit, or get their clarity a little bit. I'm not sure what the role of XR is in that. I used to be a counsellor, so I know how I'd do it. I don't know how XR would do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of conflicts, we are decentralized, so it's kind of dealt with differently in each area. We can't tell people what to do, but we do have processes that we can recommend. And yeah, I mean, the only thing that is very like essentially XR is the 3 demands and 10 principles, and everything else we build around that is like an alliance of the willing. So you know about temperature checks and introducing those. I've literally had someone get up and walk out of a meeting as soon as I tried to introduce hand signals, which was so weird. But yeah, Cass, you look like you've got something to say about that.
I think there's a bit of a history with the Occupy movement. So people who've seen Occupy maybe don't trust it, but I mean, it's useful. So
yeah, it is. It's so useful because, Nat, do you want to have a go at explaining why we'd use hand signals?
Yeah, I mean, I would think, in my experience, it's been just a very sort of gentle, kind of polite way to help manage the conversation at best.
Yeah, exactly. And it gives you a chance to get a mood of the room really quickly. Yes, John?
I just support what you've said, that some people don't like it. They haven't been exposed to feedback about themselves. So especially at the introductory meetings, I've been to a couple of meetings where 2 or 3 people walked out of each of them because they just found it so confronting that anyone would want to interrupt the speech that they've come to give, that we didn't arrange for them to give, but they're coming to give a speech, yeah.
Yeah, well, on that, I just let you know that one thing I generally do at the start of meetings is give it, while we wait for the 10 minutes to start the Heading for Extinction talk, I invite any local issues campaigns to just give their little spiel in that time. Because I don't know about you, but if I'm in a meeting that's not about XR, I'm just itching for a chance to talk about it. And so just opening that space at the beginning and letting people dump the thing that's like really precious to them at the start really helps with that as well. But yeah, temperature checks are really important. So in XR, we don't go off full consent, consensus. We go integrative consent. So it's not everybody has to agree to get stuff done. You all said you're pretty keen enough on SOS, so that's good. But let's just quickly run through this. So the presenter would present a proposal. Then you have a questions round for people to clarify. Then a reactions round, so for people to sort of say yes or no, I disagree or agree. Reformulation or amendments of the proposal. Objections round. Then we facilitated tests of valid objections. I know this is a bit dense here, but I think you can kind of see the flow. Is there any of like sort of checking in with people? And sometimes this can be a really quick process, like I think that we should all finish 5 minutes early. Who agrees? Who doesn't agree? Do we have any problems with that? And you can get like really quick decisions. And then sometimes you really have to go back in and around these 2 reactions, objections round to facilitate and find your proposal that then you can integrate and make a decision on. Oh, you're just yeah, great. So here we go. Sometimes you'll walk into a meeting with no agenda, but if you are the facilitator, I'm hoping that you've spent a little bit of time at least building yourself a base agenda. And your base agenda might look something like acknowledgements. I find it's so calming when you're writing an agenda to just know your first point. And that is acknowledgements, and it just means that you're never starting with a blank page. We obviously also always do check-ins, so you've already got your second one. Really important when agenda sharing within Extinction Rebellion is to have your information sharing section. Because we are a decentralized movement, things just happen in different parts of the rebellion that are so interesting and people need to know about. But maybe it didn't make the newsletter round. Maybe it's, you know, I don't know, it's just so important to have that information sharing. And so it's just like, hey, does anyone know what's going on around? And then if it starts to become a discussion, obviously that's just a dump. So don't let that become a discussion. As a facilitator, you've got to keep that section tight. We're not making any decisions in this section. And if it looks like it's something that the team want to discuss, you can either say, all right, team, like you need to go to the meeting that's about that particular thing. So if it's like, oh, we're holding a Pedal Rebel action, and then people want to start discussing the logistics of Pedal Rebels, be like, no, you've got to go to the Pedal Rebel meeting. This is a meeting about message, like marketing or whatever, like regen, whatever it is. And then, but if it's like, oh, this is relevant because we need to make sure that the Pedal Rebels have regen because they've like talked about, you know, doing a 5K ride and we're regen and we don't know anything about their regenerative culture around that 5K ride or whatever, then, you know, bring it back to the group and put it in the agenda. Project updates, checklist review, and what's really important with this like checklist and sharing any data, and like going back, so you'll have sort of agenda items from the previous action points, we call them, like action point, Cass, write the minutes or whatever. Then, you know, you would say, okay, what action points have we done throughout the week? And just to check in, Cass, you did the minutes. Oh my God, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Because who thanks Cass if your team doesn't thank Cass? So really making sure as a facilitator that we're practicing that active gratitude as well. Because yeah, if we don't thank each other, nobody thanks us. So we got to be those people for each other. Okay, yep, and then always a checkout. Checkouts are so important, and I know it can feel a bit awkward asking people to go through these formal processes of check-ins and checkouts, but it's really, really important to culture, because if stuff has happened throughout the meeting, having that section and that time to just dump, and it's also a technique used in psychology, you know, if you've had a heavy meeting, just saying what's coming up for you next. So with the checkout, ask them what they're doing after the meeting. And so then they don't just get to the end of the meeting and feel really frazzled and overwhelmed. They've already had a space to talk about what's next for them. And so that can be really grounding. So in particularly heavy meetings, always in your checkout, ask them what they're having for dinner or what they're doing the next day, and just ground them in the fact that there is after the meeting before you let them go. Minutes are pretty important, but generally we just record in the minutes action points and agreements. We don't need, like, don't make someone type up everything that everybody says. It's not needed. No one's going to read it. Just agreements and action points. And some more action heavy teams, working groups have a project board. So keep those updated. Okay. All right. Remember that in Extinction Rebellion, we have a motto, which is good enough to go, safe enough to try. And so when you're facilitating, remember that not everybody has to agree, but it just has to be safe enough to try and good enough to go. And whoever has the mandate to be comfortable carrying that forward. All right, so we're not actually going to have a breakout because there's just not that many of us, but I would like to offer you a chance to facilitate us. We can probably stop the recording now through